Welcome. For those who lived in the 19th and early 20th centuries, the American Revolution made the United States. But the French Revolution not only remade Europe, but its shockwaves resounded the whole world over. Some of this is because the American Revolution had a clear beginning and ending. It lasted for 7 years, beginning in 1776 and ending in 1783. No one doubts that the French Revolution began in 1789, but when did it end? Many would say 1815, with the defeat of Napoleon at Waterloo. But this means that the French Revolution lasted for 26 years, quite literally for an entire generation. Perhaps this is why 19th century Europe saw revolution upon revolution, and country after country. But if this is the case, then perhaps the French Revolution did not end in 1815, but instead it continued on, perhaps even into the 20th century. Today, we'll look at the beginning of the French Revolution. Before we go any further, we need to make one thing clear. The French Revolution was absolutely not the French version of the American Revolution. To briefly summarize, consider the following. In the American Revolution, American colonists asserted no taxation without representation. But in France, we find almost the opposite concern. According to the most important early document of the French Revolution, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen, when it came to the well-being of the nation, for the maintenance of the public force, and for administrative expenses, a general tax is indispensable. Furthermore, whereas the American Revolution began in opposition to both the British King and Parliament, the French Revolution began in opposition to the aristocracy. There are some similarities. Both revolutions called for freedom of speech and freedom of the press. Each revolution also supported vesting political sovereignty in something other than a monarch. But here we see differences too. The American Revolution was justified, at least after the fact, in the name of we the people. But the French Revolution saw support for the nation, admittedly a philosophical idea and ideal that, as time went on, proved distinct from the people. But there was a strong difference in their approaches to religion. The newly formed United States, at least at the federal level, had no established church. But the French Revolution began with a Catholic Church already established. As the revolution grew more radical, the Catholic Church was disestablished, then ransacked, its clergy terrorized and even murdered. But this extremism only led to the Catholic Church being re-established. At the risk of repetition, the French Revolution was absolutely not the French version of the American Revolution. No historical event has just one cause, and this is especially true of big events like revolutions. The French Revolution was woven from a variety of threads. One thread is intellectual. The 18th century saw a recurring tendency, at least in some corners of society, to praise reason as the greatest of human capacities. Reason was therefore sometimes set against religion. And do keep in mind that, before the French Revolution, the Catholic Church was the state church in France, and almost everyone was a member of it. According to the philosophe Diderot, reason is to the philosophe what grace is to the Christian. Grace moves the Christian to act. Reason moves the philosophe. But what happens in this scenario if some people are not wholly reasonable? Diderot had a rather ominous answer to this question. Whoever does not wish to reason, renouncing his nature as a human being, must be treated as an unnatural being. We might therefore ask, does this view of reason, combined with its antipathy toward the allegedly unreasonable, help explain the violence that later overtook the French Revolution? Another thread is economic. In the 1780s, the French government struggled financially. During the 7 Years' War, France had fought against both the American colonists and the British. Here, France lost, both militarily and financially. But France then joined the American colonists to fight the British in the American Revolution. Here, the Americans and the French won. But this victory was also, in the end, a financial loss for France. So France gained nothing more than a bit of pride in defeating the British. In 1787, the French king, Louis XVI, called the French nobles together to try and figure out how to avoid bankruptcy. This was called the Assembly of Notables. They met and argued for months, but resolved nothing. Hence, the king sought a new way forward. He looked to revive the Estates General, a representative body that had not met for nearly 175 years. The Estates General comprised three groups, known as orders or estates. These distinctions were many centuries old and are generally known today as feudalism. The first estate was those who pray, that is, the Catholic clergy. The second estate was those who fight, that is, knights, now known as nobles or the aristocracy. The third and lowest estate was those who worked, commoners, peasants, artisans. And this raised an important question. Who would represent the third estate? And how many members of the Estates General should come from the third estate? These questions led to what you might call the third and final thread of the French Revolution, a crisis in political representation. And this led to the most important political pamphlet of 1789, entitled What is the Third Estate? Its author was a Catholic clergyman, Emmanuel Joseph Sieyès. He opened his work with a simple set of questions. What is the third estate? Everything. What, until now, has it been in the public order? Nothing. What does it want to be? Something. According to Sieyès, the third estate comprised the vast bulk of the population. He estimated 25 to 26 million people were in this order. He further estimated that the nobility comprised only about 70,000 members, not including women and children. And he estimated that the clergy comprised 81,400 members, including monks and nuns. Together, these two orders made up less than 200,000 people. And so, Sieyès asked, if the third estate was so very large, and the nobility and clergy so very small, shouldn't the third estate have at least the same number of representatives as the other two orders? However, it must be emphasized that Sieyès did not oppose the church or the clergy. Rather, he aimed at one group, the nobility. He pointed to the failed meeting of the Assembly of Notables in 1787. He argued that they had opposed the king, and this made them enemies of both Louis XVI and the wider nation. In the last pages of his pamphlet, he proposed in a long footnote that without the nobility, the French would become, in his words, the freest and most happy nation on earth. The French Revolution did not begin against the monarchy. Rather, it began against the aristocracy. In his pamphlet, Sieyès developed an idea that he called the general will of the nation. Borrowing from the 18th century political theorist Jean-Jacques Rousseau, this was Sieyès' most important theoretical contribution to the French Revolution. Sieyès had an exalted idea of the general will, and in the 5th chapter of his work, he wrote, "The nation exists prior to everything. It is the origin of everything. Its will is always legal." He emphasized that in consulting the nation, morality and virtue were key, but the nation also transcended the written laws of the land. This was rather different than the American Constitution, which sought to use written law as the boundary for all action, whether by the people or the branches of government. For Sieyès, precedent was not necessary. If the nation wanted something done, it should simply be done. In writing this, Sieyès took aim at the Estates General. He wanted a different kind of meeting, one that was more representative of the Third Estate. There was no legal precedent for this, but he believed that it was the will of the French nation, and thus the right thing to do. There are, however, elements in Sieyès that might appear less attractive. In the same chapter, he proposed that the majority can never capitulate to the minority. Who was this minority? He was probably thinking of the nobility, but he didn't say so. In reading CA, you might ask, is there a safe place for maintaining minority positions? Or was CA more like Diderot, arguing that his opponents were somehow less than human? In his sixth and final chapter, CA proposed a new representative body. He called it the National Assembly. He believed that it would better represent the nation because it would be largely comprised of the Third Estate. Remarkably, on June 17, 1789, a large gathering of the Third Estate voted to create CA's National Assembly, and on June 20th, they assembled for their first meeting. The king did not take this well. After all, this new National Assembly had neither legal precedent nor validity. In a speech to the Estates General on June 23rd, the king ordered the National Assembly to dissolve itself. And this became the moment of crisis. Who would be sovereign? The king, or this new, purportedly representative legislative body? CA responded by taking a first step toward denying royal authority. He claimed that the people formed the National Assembly, and thus the National Assembly was responsible, above all, to the people. In refusing to dissolve itself, the National Assembly effectively declared itself sovereign, and therefore not the king. The king then made his own move. Instead of trying yet again to dissolve the National Assembly, he ordered the members of the Estates General to join it. In the short run, this looked like a noble compromise, but it also meant that in the long run, rebellion could win. For the time being, in 1789, a number of changes were soon decreed, such as equality of taxation. This did not transform the revolution into something anti-monarchical, at least not yet. In fact, during the National Assembly, the king was even hailed as the restorer of French liberties. But other changes would soon come. Here are two political cartoons from the earliest phase of the French Revolution. Both date to 1789. The first points to the traditional elements in society: the church, represented by a nun, and the family, represented by a mother with her children. The French above translates, "As long live the king, long live the nation." The French below translates, "As I knew well that we would have our turn." But there's a second picture, in which the three orders of society are inverted. Reading the picture from left to right, the first estate, represented here by a priest, the second estate, represented here by a nobleman, and the third estate, in the form of a peasant. But the order here is also inverted, with the peasant, or third estate, riding on the back of the aristocracy. Yet again, we have the same two French slogans: "Long live the king, long live the nation," as well as, "I knew well that we would have our turn." But, like many political cartoons, this second cartoon fuses humor with polemic. Here, the third estate is having its day. So what? The most important document composed in the early phase of the French Revolution was the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen. Here is one of its early artistic representations. The religious imagery matters. After all, France was a largely Catholic country. We see the eye of God centered at the top and an angel to the right. Furthermore, the contents of the Declaration appear organized on two tables, exactly like the Ten Commandments. To the left is the feminine personification of France holding broken chains, symbolizing the conviction that the Declaration leads to freedom. The Declaration opens in the name of the representatives of the French people, organized in the National Assembly. So neither the king nor the Estates General were used to justify its contents. 17 points then follow. First is a general declaration of human freedom. And although the Declaration allows for social distinctions, it says that these should only be for social utility. The third point located political sovereignty not in the king, but in the nation. The influence of CA was evident here, and especially in the sixth article, which identified the law with the general will. Continuing on, we find such guarantees as freedom of religion and the press, and the defense of private property. Much of this sounds familiar, But every revolution is a theater of contingencies, and in the breakdown of normal order, contingencies can have almost free rein. And so, although this is how the French Revolution began, it's not how it ended. If you're interested in learning more, these books are worth consulting. In truth, there's no shortage of material on the French Revolution. If you want a quick read, look at William Doyle, The French Revolution, A Very Short Introduction. Slightly longer is Jeremy Popkin's work, A Short History of the French Revolution. Doyle and Popkin have also published longer histories and more detailed studies of the French Revolution. All are worth reading. Finally, CA's pamphlet, What is the Third Estate?, is included in the larger collection of translated works entitled Political Writings. That's all for now. Thanks so much for watching. Please hit the subscribe button, feel free to leave a comment, and I'll see you next time.